The very next day, political analysts expected chaos. Instead, something entirely unexpected happened. On Sunday, May 24, 2026, the Speaker of the National Assembly, Malick Ndiaye, a close political ally of Sonko, announced his resignation. In a statement posted on social media, Ndiaye wrote, "After deep reflection, matured in silence, responsibility and a sense of state, I have decided to resign from my functions as President of the National Assembly." The resignation came just 2 days after Sonko was fired. But why would a sitting speaker step down so suddenly? The answer was clear. Ndiaye was clearing the path. Pastef, the ruling party, held 130 out of 165 seats in Parliament. By stepping aside, Ndiaye created a vacancy that only Sonko could fill. The board was being set for a political masterstroke. Let me pause here and state something important. This was not a coup. This was not an unconstitutional power grab. The Constitution of Senegal permits the National Assembly to elect its own speaker, and Pastef, with its supermajority, was fully within its rights to nominate and elect whomever it chose. But that does not make the move any less stunning. A Prime Minister fired on Friday, and by Tuesday he was being positioned to become the second highest ranking official in the country. This is the genius of the parliamentary checkmate. Faye controls the executive. Sonko was about to capture the legislature.
Cheered by a captivated audience, Ousmane Sonko settles into his new chair, that of President of the National Assembly. He, who was Prime Minister just 4 days ago, now becomes the master of the parliamentary game. And his first words are for the new head of government, Amadou Alaminu Mohamed Lo, who was appointed the day before.
He is a tireless worker, a competent man, a devoted man. Even if, on the other hand, I must be honest that we have some differences on certain issues, notably the monetary question, debt management, and other similar matters.
A few moments earlier, Ousmane Sonko was elected without surprise with 132 votes out of 165. The Pastef party alone has 130 deputies. After months of tension between the leader of Pastef and the president, Bassirou Diomaye Faye, who had long been an ally, Ousmane Sonko now has an institutional counterweight, a relief for his supporters.
It's a new era, an era that builds on what has already been accomplished. He said it himself. He has been a mayor, he has been prime minister, and he was a deputy once before. Today, he returns with this experience, this wealth of experience, to fully play his role. That is, the role of keeping the government in check.
In his speech, Ousmane Sonko assured that he would not use his new position to create institutional chaos. Yet this is exactly what opposition deputies feared. Having boycotted the session, they believe that the internal regulations do not allow for Ousmane Sonko's reintegration into the assembly and are asking the president to refer the matter to the Constitutional Council.
We're heading straight for an institutional crisis. It's a shame, it's unfortunate, it's sad, it's worrying. But today, it's inevitable. Because there will be a clash between institutions. Differences are going to arise. And this conflict, it's going to start in the National Assembly. And that's why we have the duty, the obligation to sound the alarm.
This Tuesday, some media outlets claimed that the President of the Republic had referred the matter to the Constitutional Council. We contacted the presidency, which denied this information.
On May 26, 2026, just 4 days after his dismissal, Ousmane Sonko stood before the National Assembly and was elected Speaker with an overwhelming majority. The final tally, 132 votes in favour, none against, and 1 abstention. Lawmakers rose in a prolonged ovation. The former Prime Minister was now the head of Parliament. Pastef's supermajority, 130 out of 165 seats, ensured that no opposition could block the manoeuvre. Sonko's allies had carefully orchestrated every step: the resignation of the previous speaker, the reinstatement of Sonko's parliamentary mandate, and the swift election. But here is where the legal complexity emerges. According to some interpretations of Senegal's constitution, Sonko had technically renounced his parliamentary mandate when he accepted the position of Prime Minister. His critics accused Pastef of bypassing standard procedure and called the election illegal and a dark day for Senegalese democracy. Yet, the legal arguments were overruled by political arithmetic. Pastef simply voted him in, and the opposition, which had boycotted the session, could only watch from the sidelines. Let us be clear about what this means. The Speaker of the National Assembly is the second highest office in Senegal. Sonko now controls the parliamentary calendar, the formation of committees, investigative commissions, and, most importantly, the ability to call votes of no confidence against the very government that just fired him.
We are live with you, Sarah Sacco, our correspondent in Dakar. Hello, Sarah. I announced in the headlines the reintegration of Ousmane Sonko as a deputy, and even more since a few moments you tell us.
Yes, exactly. In fact, what happened is that the first vice president of the National Assembly validated the reintegration of Ousmane Sonko as president before proceeding to the plenary vote. We were able to see the deputy Sonko slide his ballot into the ballot box under a thunder of applause. He is the only candidate in the plenary vote, and this is, it must be said, a formality since his party, the Pastef, has a large majority, 130 deputies out of 165. The opposition deputies boycotted the vote. They were seen leaving the National Assembly a few minutes ago. Aissata Talsal, who belongs to the main opposition coalition, Taku Walu Senegal, shouts at the scandal, at the coup d'etat institutional. So what is the problem exactly? According to these deputies and some jurists, Ousmane Sonko, who was elected in December 2024 while he was already prime minister, and that the two functions are incompatible, has renounced his mandate as deputy. That is to say for them that he has been a resignationist, and any resignation is definitive. It is therefore not for them to reintegrate him. This is not possible, she explained to us. A non-deputy was elected at the head of the National Assembly. This is what she told us in strong enough words. So what can happen now? Since I told you it's a formality. Moreover, the vote is over. I saw the ballot placed on the table of the first vice president. So what can happen, according to the analysts, is that Ousmane Sonko will have the ability to block certain decisions. We may therefore have an executive against the legislative. We will have to see how the first steps of this assembly will go. In any case, what is certain is that President Diomaye cannot dissolve it before December 2026, that is to say 2 years after the last election.
President Faye now faces a constitutional trap. Under Article 87 of the Senegalese constitution, the president cannot dissolve the National Assembly during the first 2 years of a legislature. The current legislature began its term in 2024. That means Faye is legally barred from calling new elections until at least November 2026. For at least 5 months, Sonko has institutional impunity. He can block the government's budget, delay critical reforms, launch parliamentary inquiries, and fundamentally paralyze the executive branch. This is what analysts are calling a dual power structure, an informal cohabitation where President Faye controls the formal machinery of the state, while Speaker Sonko controls the political environment in which that machinery must operate. Listen carefully. Faye cannot remove Sonko from the speakership. The National Assembly alone elects its speaker, and unless Sonko himself resigns, his term as speaker runs for the full duration of the legislature, unless Faye can somehow dissolve parliament, which he cannot do until November at the earliest. The president is trapped. The man he fired now sits in the second highest office in the land, with the power to block his entire reform agenda. President Faye moved quickly to form a new government. On June 2, 2026, he appointed Amadou Al-Aminou Lo, a former senior official of the Central Bank of West African States, as the new prime minister. Lo, a technocrat with no political base, formed a 30-member cabinet, 26 ministers and 4 junior ministers. But Sonko had already played his next card. On the same day, he announced that Pastef would not participate in the new government. In a statement, Sonko declared that Pastef would not be represented by any ministers, and that the party would not enter a government where it cannot have at least half of the positions. Yet, here is the twist. Some Pastef members defied Sonko's instruction and accepted ministerial posts. This exposed a potential fracture within the party itself, a split between those loyal to Sonko's hardline stance and those willing to compromise with President Faye. The boycott means that Faye's government now must govern with a parliamentary majority that is not fully committed to its success. Sonko, as Speaker, controls the legislative schedule. He can slow down or outright block any legislation that does not align with his vision. The government is formed, but it is operating under a shadow.
Senegal's President Bassirou Diomaye Faye has announced a new 30-member government that excludes the Pastef party led by his ousted Prime Minister. Faye's announcement came in a live television broadcast less than 2 weeks after he fired former ally Ousmane Sonko. The two men fell out amid mounting political and economic tensions, including Sonko's opposition to an IMF-backed debt restructuring plan.
While the government struggled to find its footing, Sonko consolidated his political base. On June 6, 2026, at the first National Congress of Pastef since its founding in 2014, Sonko was re-elected as party leader for a 6-year term. The vote was unanimous, 589 votes out of 589 delegates. Held in Diamniadio, just outside the capital Dakar, the Congress was a powerful display of grassroots loyalty. Delegates carried signs reading Sonko 2029, a clear signal of his intention to run for president in the next election. Sonko now holds two of the most powerful positions in Senegal: Speaker of the National Assembly and leader of the ruling political party. President Faye, meanwhile, holds the presidency, but without the full backing of his own party. Let us be absolutely clear about what is happening here. In most parliamentary systems, the president and the party leader work in tandem. They share a common agenda. But in Senegal today, President Faye and Speaker Sonko are not allies. They are political rivals operating under the same institutional roof. The result is an unprecedented power struggle, one that could paralyze Senegal's government at the very moment the country faces its most severe debt crisis in decades.
Voilà, merci beaucoup. Merci beaucoup. Merci beaucoup. Merci beaucoup. Ki yor lumière yi na ma ko indi laatal s'il vous plaît. Merci beaucoup à l'équipe organisationnelle. Merci beaucoup au SNCOM. Lumière. Merci beaucoup à la presse. Yal na Yàlla sàmm, yal na Yàlla musal ci cat. Yal na Yàlla sàmm, yal na Yàlla aar. Léegi nag ñu taalal ma lumière yi. S'il vous plaît. Buñ ma ko taalalee ñu mën a tàmbali liggéey bi, s'il vous plaît. Nañ taal lumière yi.
So, where does this leave Senegal? President Faye controls the executive branch, the military, foreign policy, and the emergency powers of the presidency, but he cannot pass a budget, approve new taxes, or enact major reforms without the cooperation of the National Assembly. Speaker Sonko controls the legislature. He sets the parliamentary agenda, forms committees, and can call for votes of no confidence. But he cannot implement policy, command the armed forces, or represent Senegal abroad. This is not a coup. This is not a rebellion. It is a constitutional deadlock between two men who once ran on the same ticket. And in the middle of this standoff, Senegal's economy is struggling. The debt-to-GDP ratio has ballooned. The IMF has frozen its lending program, and the cost of living continues to rise. The question now is whether Senegal's institutions can withstand this pressure. The constitution has not broken, but it is being tested in ways its drafters never imagined. For the citizens of Senegal, the stakes could not be higher. The government they elected to fix the economy is now locked in a power struggle with its own former prime minister. And the clock is ticking toward November 2026, when Faye may finally dissolve parliament, or when Sonko may use his speakership to force a vote of no confidence that brings the government down. This is not the end of the story. It is just the beginning of a new, uncertain chapter. If you believe that African stories need to be told with depth and context, subscribe to Voice of Africa. Share this video, and comment below. Where are you watching from? Dakar? Nairobi? Lagos? Johannesburg, London, New York. The world is listening, and Senegal's crisis is just beginning.